Lay out your pattern on the fabric, put the material down on the ground. Put the right sides of the material together. This is the selvage edge, and you need the selvage edges to be on top of each other. And this is the raw edge at the bottom here. Up here we've got the folded edge of your fabric there. Smooth out your material so it's nice and flat. If you have a one-way design, you'll have to cut out your fabric slightly differently, so you'll need to talk to your teacher about this. Lay your pattern down with the top of the pyjamas up at the folded end of your fabric. Put it over to one side. Smooth out your pattern. When you have a look at your pattern, you'll notice that it has a line down the middle. This is called the straight grain. You'll need to measure this so that it is parallel to the selvage edge. Start by measuring one corner and then the other end of the arrow to see if it's the same, and adjust the pattern if you need to. Now it's time to pin your pattern onto your material. Pin the pattern on. Pins don't need to be that close together. Make sure you've got one in all of the corners of your pattern. Leave a big gap on one side, and this will be for when you make your pyjama bag. So move your make sure your pattern's right over to one side before you start cutting. Cut the material as close to the edge of your pattern as you can. Be careful not to cut the pattern itself. When you've cut out your pattern, then you can take your pins out. Fold the pattern up and put it back into the envelope for someone else to use. The first thing we're going to do is some ironing. This is going to help us for later on in our pattern. You've got two pattern pieces here, one for each leg of your pyjamas. Start by ironing the top of the pyjamas. Turn it over. Then fold down 1 centimetre. Iron this the whole way along. Make sure the iron is on a cotton setting so you have a good firm crease. You then need to fold this down 5 centimetres. You'll need a tape measure to measure this. Measure it in a few places to make sure it's the same the whole way along. If it's not, just adjust it slightly so that it is. Iron again, pressing hard to give a nice firm edge along this folded edge. You'll need to do this to the other leg of your pyjamas as well. When you've done this, we're going to fold the pyjamas ready for the first line of sewing. Fold them inside out so the right sides of the material are together. We're going to line up the inside leg first. So line it up at the crotch point first and then keep all the edges together. Make sure it's smooth along this part where you're going to be stitching, and smooth it down with your fingers. Spend a lot of time making sure all the edges are exactly together. Don't worry about this part here that's not flat. It's the part that you're stitching that you need to have flat. Oops, put the pins in this way. They're perpendicular to the way you're going to sew. In that way, when you sew along, you can carefully sew straight over the top of the pins. This will help you keep your pieces of fabric will stay together. When you've pinned it all and it's all nice and smooth, then you can go and sew this. You'll sew it on 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. This is the distance from the edge to where you're stitching. Take your pins out now. You'll use the needle number 15 on your needle plate to make sure that you go straight. Cut your threads up where you did your little back stitch. Make sure you have a back stitch at both ends, otherwise you'll have a hole in your pyjamas. You can overlock this edge if you think you're good at overlocking, otherwise you can do a zigzag finish. Do the same with the other leg. Turn one leg inside the right way. And we put this inside the other leg. We're going to stitch the crotch seam now. This will be stitched in one continuous piece. Put one leg inside the other leg so the right sides of your material will actually be together. This part can be a little bit tricky. Find the crutch seam and hold these two seams together. Make sure the seam goes opposite directions for comfort. Have a look inside and join up the rows of stitching. Put a pin in there first. Then get the edges together up both sides. We're going to stitch around in this action. Make sure the edges are together. Start pinning near the bottom pin that you put in. Put your pins in at right angles again, and you'll need lots of pins this time. Put the pins about 5 centimeters apart and keep checking that the edges are together. Smooth out again the other side. Keep checking your edges are together. When you stitch this row of stitching, you'll use a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So you'll need to use the number 15 on your sewing machine needle plate to follow to go straight. You're going to check this now that you've pinned it and double check that everything is smooth and flat. This is where you'll stitch. Okay. This is the end of part 1 video. You'll need to go to part 2 to finish your pyjamas.